Today's conversation is extra special. Look, I know I say this every time. Everybody I speak with is special, but today is extra special. If you've read a book or an article on artificial intelligence, there's a very good chance that you've heard about this gentleman, that you've heard about his company. The company is called X.ai. This is a personal assistant that automatically books appointments for you or books your meetings. It takes away all that grunt work of connecting and rescheduling. A phenomenal piece of technology. The gentleman I'm speaking with today is Dennis Mortensen. So Dennis has built and sold multiple companies to other organizations like Yahoo and Outbrain. So he knows what he's doing. He somehow, I don't know how he does it. I try to get that out of him, sort of predict what the next company will be, where the future is going. So he's been very successful in predicting the trends and building businesses around that. He's got companies like SoftBank Capital who are investing in him. He's only been around for about, I think, since 2014. And X.ai, he didn't say anything to me, but I had that distinct sense that something big is coming. I had a fantastic conversation. I just know you're going to enjoy this. This is really inspiring stuff. Here we're really looking at the future, the difference between conversational UI and intelligent agents, what the difference is and how that is applicable to marketing. So this is, as I said, this is extra special. I hope you enjoy this as much as I have. Dennis, fantastic having you on the call here today. I'm super excited to be speaking with you. I mean, you sort of remind me of the Elon Musk of Denmark. I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of Elon as well, being South African. But you've got multiple successful businesses behind your name. You had originally had the Index Tools, which you sold to Yahoo, Visual Revenue, which you sold to Outbrain. Now you've got X.ai. How did you move into artificial intelligence from Index Tools?
I would like to believe, and I'm very comfortable if somebody calls bullshit on this, but I would like to believe that there's some sort of coherent narrative in my path up until this point. So back in the mid-90s, we set up shop and did log file analysis. So web servers would spit out log files and we would kind of try to extract insight from that in a very manual process, and had very fortunate outcome of selling that company in April 2000. So we got out on the right side of the dot-com bomb. And after that, we worked on Index Tools, which was us allowing the customer to extract this insight himself. You put a JavaScript tag on a page, we collect and store that data. You can retrieve it from a web interface yourself. We know this as Google Analytics today, right? And then thereafter, we set up shop with Visual Revenue, for where not only did we allow the customer to extract the insight himself, but we provided a set of recommendations for where if you can't figure out what the insight is, perhaps I can just extract it automatically. And you look at that and say, yeah, that kind of makes sense. How about I do as you suggested? And then lastly, if you look at what we do today with Amy at X.ai, we not only really collect, store the data, retrieve it, try to make insight out of it and make a recommendation, we actually take the action as well. Because if you ask Amy to set up a meeting, she won't just provide you insight into how you could do that. She will do the job. So I think in my mind, at least, there's some sort of connection between us trying to make value of data 20 years ago up until this point today, for where we're still trying to do the same, just with ever more sophisticated technologies. But it might just be a pipe dream of my own.
Now, because I think it's pretty impressive that you've, let me call it, predict where the market is going. You've been very successful at that. So in terms of A.xi and Amy, I've got to admit, I have had a couple of interactions with Amy a while back, and I didn't even know that Amy was artificial intelligence. I thought I was having a nice sort of conversation as somebody was booking an appointment with me. Fantastic technology. So you started the company back in 2014, right?
That's correct. So we brought the band back together late 2013 with at least the idea of trying to figure out whether this was even plausible. And then we set up proper shop in April of 2014 with a little bit of seed money, about $2 million, to come up with a data set for where we could prove that this could be solved. So not your typical seed round where you end up with some sort of MVP and a little bit of revenue traction and customer love and what have you. But for us, it was about collecting a data set for where I could go out and show you this can be solved. And we've always known that this journey would be much more dramatic than your traditional weekend hackathon or your 3 months in Palo Alto in some startup incubator, but a year-long journey. And we've been working on it for 3 years and have just started to kind of commercialize it.
Now that's pretty impressive, because although it's, let's say, only 3 years, I mean, even back in 2014, I would imagine the challenge would have still been a lot bigger than it is had you started today, because now I see a lot more, let's say, companies opening up APIs to their technology and that. So you really started when it probably was a lot more difficult to achieve what you have.
We certainly started before AI was super sexy, but for us, it was never really about us becoming an AI company. It was the idea that if you look out the window and pick that first 20 people who walk on the other side of the road and ask them, hey, have you set up meetings this week or last week? They'll all say yes. And if you ask them, did you like that? They'll tell you, no, I fucking hate it. And that pain, that's the pain we latched onto. But it just seemed to us that any one of the existing solutions over the last really decade and a half, for where some plugin, some extension, some app, you doodle me, you tungle me, was not what the market wanted. What they really wanted, if they had some sort of unlimited finances, was a human assistant that could sit in the front office, and if some request comes into your inbox, you can say, hey, Tom, could you get me and Dennis together first week of July when I'm in Manhattan, please? And then it's Tom's job. The sad thing is just that Tom costs you $60,000 a year, so you can't afford it. So it falls back on you. But that kind of suggested to us that the market told us what they wanted. So they didn't want a new solution. They wanted a affordable replica of Tom. So for us, that was really what we latched on to. The only way to solve that, or to build Tom, if you will, was to kind of create AI and Amy in this kind of entity setting where she can solve it on our behalf.
Let me ask you this, Dennis. What would you say was the most challenging piece in terms of building, let's say, Amy?
It's a good question. In hindsight, it's always easy to figure out what you should have done 2 years ago, but somehow you just couldn't see it back then. I think there's a few challenges where if I had to do the whole thing over again on June 1st, 2017, the time and energy that we applied to defining the universe which we exist in. Remember, we exist in this meeting scheduling universe. We're not trying to solve everything. We're just trying to be really good at setting up meetings. But in that universe, for where you have intents like new meeting, cancel meeting, reschedule, running late, you're mandatory, I'm optional, and so on and so forth, which is a finite list of intents. Defining that, we should have invested way more time and energy into that so that the efforts coming after that wouldn't have to be kind of re-engineered because we didn't do a good job the first time around. So that's certainly something which we've learned. 2, once you've defined that universe, just because you have the definition, if you cannot come up with a set of annotation guidelines for where somebody else can sit and label this data so that it aligns to your definition of this universe, then you don't have any data set. And it doesn't matter how many PhDs you have on staff, because they can't build any models that kind of replicates or really predicts any one of these intents. So that set of annotation guidelines, however boring that might sound, you gotta invest in that. And I think those two are certainly memories which I have if I were to close my eyes and look back 2.5 years, where I wished we would have invested way more.
Are you planning to build other services around your business?
So we are hyper-focused on making our 2 agents, Amy and Andrew, successful. And I'm sure you would agree with me that it's kind of easy to be half-assed at 7 things And it's almost impossible to be world-class at one thing. And if you're world-class at one thing, if you get there, you can pretty much do whatever you want at that point in time. So we're trying very hard not to dream up 15 other things which we could also do. And it's not that that's hard. You and me can go to the whiteboard right now and come up with 15 good ideas that are not completely disconnected to what we do. But we don't. We're just 100 propeller heads in New York who's trying to make the most of Amy and Andrew and their kind of ability to schedule meetings. That doesn't mean that we lost all ambition. And what you'll see is that we'll really expand on 3 dimensions. One, we will expand into other languages, not just so we can increase the potential markets we can go attack, but also so that the assistant become kind of superhuman, for where you couldn't hire a human assistant today who spoke 17 languages. If she did, hell, you'll be working for her instead. So that just doesn't happen, right? The assistant can speak to your guests in their native tongue, but also so we can go attack other markets. 2, we want to provide the opportunity for Amy and Andrew to exist in other communication channels. So wherever you talk about meetings, whether that be internally on Slack, whether that be externally on email, whether that be intimately on text with your wife and kids, wherever that might be, you should be able to wake up the agent and say, hey, you know what? Get Dennis and I together later this afternoon. And the 3rd dimension upon where we're going to expand is this set of connections that we can make on the event itself. So if you and I meet up next Wednesday at 2 o'clock and it's for lunch, why do I have to log into OpenTable and book a table? You do that for me, Amy. If we meet up in Midtown, why am I booking the Uber? You do that for me, Amy. If we meet up for the first time and I couldn't exactly remember who you were, why isn't there a small bio in the invite or a LinkedIn link so I can just look at that? So all of these little things that comes along with the invite, say we want to do a demo, you log into WebEx for me and pull out the right URL and take the Singaporean number because that's where one of the participants are and include that in the invite. So more languages, more communication channels, and extensions into these kind of elements that belong with the event invite itself. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. In fact, that's very inspiring. Where do you see AI going in your space and / marketing?
I am a firm believer that there's a host, if not hundreds of thousands, potential millions of apps and desktop applications that don't belong in that paradigm. So there's certainly some applications that belong on the command line, and plenty of my engineers operate there, and that's exactly how they want to access that application. There's certainly plenty of applications that exist on the desktop, and any designer would hate not to have the 27-inch monitor and a desktop to kind of go work on Photoshop. And there's certainly plenty of apps for where I want it on my phone, say Google Maps. When I walk the city, I want to look on my phone and figure out where to go. But there's also a bunch of other settings inside and out of just marketing for where that was not the right paradigm. So let me give you an example here, which is not necessarily just on marketing, but just to kind of conceptualize this. So you come visit me, you stay at the Hilton, and it's 11 p.m. and you want a Diet Coke. Your first thought is not, hey, you know what? Let me go to the App Store. Let me find the Hilton app. Let me download and install it. Let me set up an account. Let me log in. Let me find the store. Let me add Diet Coke to the basket. Let me check out. Let me add my credit card details. As in, you fucking died before you got that Diet Coke. As in, that's not what you want. What you want is really perhaps just a number on the doors. You can text the downstairs lobby and say, hey, could you get me a Diet Coke, please? Or there's an Alexa in the room and you just shout out loud, Diet Coke, please, and it arrives. So I think there's going to be a massive transition from past application paradigms into this new conversational paradigm. And in that shift, I think we need to look at all of the existing applications and all of the existing tactics and kind of agree with ourselves, do they belong where we put them? And in particular, in marketing, there might actually be many tactics and many processes that just don't belong where we put them, but somehow we didn't have any other option. But I do think with AI and the conversational UI in particular, new avenues are arriving, and we need to kind of reevaluate those past choices. And I think we do things around marketing for where we should lean back and kind of really honestly evaluate whether what we've done yesterday is something that's going to work tomorrow, or we just did it because that was the platform of the day.
But in terms of businesses exploring potential implementation of AI and AI solution, I mean, what advice would you give any business or marketing agency?
I think it is important to make a clear distinction between the conversational UI and the intelligent agent. And the conversational UI is a new UI paradigm, which does not consist of pixels and buttons and what have you. And in this conversational UI, you can, without any AI or any machine learning or any kind of sexy engineering setting, go figure out how would my customers interact with me. And I think there's plenty of settings for where what I don't want really is to go through a long FAQ to figure out whether I can do this or that on AT&T. Wouldn't it be lovely if I could just kind of ask him, hey, you know what? Can I upgrade my phone come November 1st? And then they need just to figure out what did he ask and figure out how do I answer that. For all intents and purposes, you can just hire a human to answer that. But if you figure out that, hey, not only does the customer like this way of communicating, they like this particular kind of UI, I need to figure out how I make that human machine-based, because that's certainly a whole lot more cost-effective. So full circle, try to make a distinction between the conversational UI and the intelligent agent, because the UI can be tested cheaply. And if you have success with it, then you can figure out, now, how do I implement this as a machine agent, not a human one?
Dennis, let me ask you before we sort of end off our conversation, who is your ideal customer? Who are you going after in terms of sort of introducing Amy and Andrew?
It's a good question, right? For where, if I was really bold, I think my answer would be everybody, right? For where in the US alone, we see about 10 billion formal meetings being set up every year. And they're being set up by about 90 million US knowledge workers. And that suggests that every single person who walks into an office and touches a computer in some way, shape, or form will set up a meeting. Some will set up many, some will set up a few, but they all set up meetings. Conceptually, we want to help all of them. Now, that is so grand that a small startup like ours, with a little bit above 100 folks on staff, can't go attack a market that large. So we are initially going after those single individuals in pain. Some recruiter at Netflix, or some sales manager at the New York Times, or some two people at a startup, or some CEO and founder that simply can't afford having an assistant, that just goes to our website, figured out that I can buy an assistant for $39 a month. Hell yeah, I'll take it any day of the week. And they sign up and they're happy. Now, that's one segment. The other segment is that we've just launched our business edition. So this whole idea that you can sign you and your 17 team members up, so every single individual in your firm got an assistant, which sounds like crazy talk if you hired humans to do it, but seems kind of sane when you have machines doing it. And that's the next segment we're going after. Small SMBs, for where human assistants are just not in the cards, but they still really want to alleviate some of the pain from their team. So now they can just sign up, move Amy and Andrew to their domain, so it becomes amy@clickable.com, and they can use that across the organization. So that's where we're starting. But that won't hold me away from my kind of grand vision of everybody. Because as I'm sure you can see here, right, the really awesome kind of output would be, say, for this particular meeting, where at some point I say, hey, you know what? I'd be happy to do this. I've CC'd in Amy and she can put something on my calendar. You say, wunderbar. I have CC'd in Andrew on my end. He can hash it out with Amy. But if Andrew is Amy, then you and I have the same assistant. So who the hell is she talking to? She's talking to herself, right? And that is that kind of magical moment, which we call scheduling nirvana, because we're geeks around the office, where the whole thing works out as it's supposed to. Super rapid response, because she's talking on behalf of both of us, and she'll just schedule it immediately. It'll be at very high accuracy because she knows you, she knows me, she doesn't have to talk to anybody, there can be no confusion. So that is what we're kind of trying to race towards, that kind of real network effect.
Dennis, thank you very much for taking the time to share your insights, your experience, not only with the earlier companies and how you took it from sort of index tools and before that all the way through to X.ai with Amy and Andrew, and sort of being at the cutting edge of artificial intelligence. I mean, very exciting space. I've been wanting to speak with you for a long time because you certainly are right up there. So thank you very much for your time, sharing those insights, and no doubt we will be chatting again in the future.
Thanks much for having me. Really appreciate it.